This is a short video to provide a description of the basic model of human bipedal locomotion at a velocity where we are what's considered running. And running is a movement where we are literally jumping from one foot to the other foot, and there's only one foot on the ground at a time. So let's go and take a look here. When we are running, we start off in a position where our grounded foot is in a position underneath our hips. Our center of mass is located in a position roughly above our hips. And from this position, our body mass has to lean forward some, leaning from the ankle, not from the hips. We're not bending at the waist. And this leaning forward motion allows for gravity to pull down at a greater rate than ground reaction forces pushing back up. When we are standing straight up and down, we're in a position where our center of mass is located over our foot, and in that position, ground reaction force and gravity cancel each other out. They're balanced out. They're relatively equal. When the runner or walker or any bipedal movement, if you're going to the sides or you're going backwards, you have to move your center of mass in the direction that you would like to move. So as a runner, we're moving forward, and we need to displace our center of mass in front of our ground contact point. So from here, we start moving forward, and we're actually falling forward in an arcing motion, and we move forward, and we are actively leaving our rear foot behind. Now, it might seem reasonable that we want to push and actively leave this rear foot behind, but it is actually our goal to increase our, depending on which velocity we'd like to move in, to increase our displacement at roughly 2 frames past mid-stance. Now this is in 250 frames per second, so roughly in this position, this is going to correlate directly to my velocity forward. If I leave my foot on the ground beyond this position, then it actually won't relate to my forward movement, my velocity. So when you're running, you leave your rear foot behind, and then you have to catch it back up again so that you can repeat the cycle. If you leave your rear foot too far behind, you're creating additional work. So now we're going to address the neuromuscular aspect of it. Your brain is not a great multitasker. The concepts that describe this are contralateral inhibition and interlimb coordination. When your brain focuses on one primary muscle group, it cannot focus on a second primary muscle group as much. When we're moving forward, and a forward movement is even more difficult for our brain to focus on particular movements. So if I make it my focus to focus on catching this rear foot up, my brain actually will not be able to focus on my landing foot. So at this point, if I focus on, you can see how I'm using this knee bend to retract this foot up underneath my body, and that forced this foot to land underneath my knee, underneath my center of mass. So watch the same thing with this foot. So I leave my foot behind the maximum amount that's going to directly correlate to my forward movement, and then I'm done at that point. This foot is underneath my hips. You can see this dot here and this dot at my malleolus and my greater trochanter. When this foot is underneath my greater trochanter, I can now focus on my opposite knee, and that drives, because all my cognitive focus is on retracting this foot up underneath the hips, I can't focus on this foot, and this foot just falls to the ground. And the benefit and the advantage to this foot landing underneath the hips is I can now displace my mass forward again. Now we're going to take a look at a runner who typifies the adult runner in an industrialized nation who has not been running from a young age and continuously running. We've done research showing that children underneath the age of 7 years old, they actually all run in the same manner that we see elite East Africans running, and that we just saw the past runner in the previous video running with, where they're landing in a position underneath their hips and they're retracting their foot off the ground in a timely fashion. So this runner, they're in the mid-stance position just like the previous runner, but what we're seeing instead is they leave their foot on the ground significantly longer. This foot's still on the ground. With the previous runner, this foot would have been off the ground and already retracting underneath the body. This runner is also swinging the lower leg out in front. So they're landing out in front, creating a braking force. So now the front foot is the ground contact point. The rear foot is no longer on the ground. So technically in this position, this person's center of mass is going backwards, but momentum is carrying them forward. So that means momentum is carrying them forward through a braking force. That braking force leads to injury. So then this runner barely bends the knee and they swing the leg forward. With the previous runner, we did not see that swing. We saw a retracting motion, whereas this runner swings the leg forward and then lands out in front again. So what we're seeing here is this runner landing on the ground with their heel out in front. The foot stays on the ground for a long period of time. It comes up a little bit, and then it swings forward. You can see how this foot remains at the same height, and this knee, the angle behind the knee remains static, and they swing forward, and then it comes down again. So this person's running in a rectangle fashion. Here's the same runner 25 minutes later, running with better form after instruction. And what we see now is this runner is getting their rear foot off the ground sooner. They're bending this knee sooner because it is the goal. The reason why we're bending knees is because it's the goal to retract this foot up underneath the hips. Retract this foot underneath the hips. Because this runner is focusing so much on the rear leg, we just saw the front foot just land flat underneath the knee. They're no longer landing out in front. They're running in this rectangle fashion. This angle behind the knee continues to decrease. So it's wide here and it's decreasing, 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 decreasing until this foot is underneath the hips. Once this dot is underneath this dot, we see the next leg start to bend. And that's what we saw with the previous runner as well. So now if we follow this foot, it's going in more of a circle, whereas the last one was moving in a rectangle. In this video, we're demonstrating the retracting motion. The retracting motion, so the foot is, because we've displaced the center of mass in front of the rear foot is behind, and we are using our hamstring and our glutes to retract this foot up underneath the hips. Yes, you see the knee out in front, but the leg here is acting like a linkage system, and it is retracting up underneath, and then it goes back down again. So we come underneath, we're bending. A good image for this, a good mental image, is to pretend there's a string on the heel, and that's the only movement. If someone had a string and we're pulling that string forward, yes, the knee would go out in front, but there's no string attached to the knee. The height of the knee is not going up. So watch it come back down again, and it comes down. And watch it come up, down, and watch it come up and down. So the purpose of this video is to help you understand the model for running mechanics. And this model is based upon the foot landing underneath the center of mass. The center of mass goes in front of the leg. And then the center of mass goes in front of the grounded foot. And the grounded foot removes from the ground. All of the brain's focus is on removing this foot from the ground. The brain is not focusing on the front foot. This front leg is dropping. There's an actual recovery part to the running stride. This leg is falling down. The lower leg is not swinging out front as we saw with the amateur running with poor running form. The foot is coming up. When we watch elite runners running, and we oftentimes watch them running in a very relaxed fashion, the relaxed manner to their running is actually what we're seeing is this front leg falling down to the ground. Or what we see with a lot of amateur runners is they're doing a lot of work with this front leg to gobble up ground and reach out and gain ground out in front. What we have to focus on is applying our metabolic energy to this rear foot coming off the ground, allowing this front foot just to fall down flat underneath to position itself. So this leg fell down. I conserved energy with this front leg. I saved energy, and it fell down. There is no driving force of this front leg. The rear leg comes up. Once this foot is underneath the hips, now the next leg bends. It's like a two-cylinder engine. Once one cylinder fires, and the point within the running stride that represents the cylinder completing its firing stage is when this malleolus is underneath this greater trochanter, and now we can focus on bending the opposite knee. And because all mental focus is on this leg, this front leg just falls and drops out of the hip relaxed. You let this leg just fall. Most people want to focus on the front foot.